In this video, we'll spend some time taking a closer look at how Vue manages the data that we pass to the constructor, along with subsequent changes to that data that necessitate re-rendering of the template. When a Vue instance is first initialized, the properties in the data object are added to the instance along with special getter and setter methods for each one. When a getter is invoked, it returns the value and also executes code that makes it remember this property and watch for subsequent changes to it. When a setter is invoked, it sets a value and also triggers a re-render if necessary. Re-rendering involves updating Vue's virtual DOM, which is a sort of model of the actual DOM that can be updated much faster. Once it's updated, it compares the new virtual DOM to the previous version, or diffs it, and then identifies the elements in the actual DOM that need to reflect those changes. Finally, it updates only those elements in the most efficient way possible. Let's look at another simple Vue app in reactive.html, which you can find in the Chapter 2 Video 1 Start folder in the exercise files. Here, I'm asking for string interpolation for the properties first name and last name, but I only have first name defined in my data object. So shouldn't it be possible to just set vm.lastname to something after creating the Vue instance? So let's refresh this page, and I can see that it still only displays first name. And although it's nice that it fails gracefully and doesn't show me any curly braces, I don't actually get that last name property that I added imperatively after creating the Vue instance. If you open up the console with F12, the first thing you'll notice is that you get a warning here. And it explains pretty clearly that you can't do this. But let's find out why not. If I clear this and just type VM in the console, I see a lot of properties here, and at the bottom, I see the last name property. But adding it had no side effects at all, and neither will setting it to a different value. But setting first name to a different value will have a side effect. Remember, first name was declared initially in our data object. Because that assignment statement didn't just set the value of first name, it also runs the setter function, which you can see here. And that triggers a re-render. This is possible because we told Vue about this property when the instance was created, so it was able to set up the special getter and setter functions. But notice that it did finally pick up that last name value that we set once it was told to re-render. But it's still not going to watch it for changes, and to do this correctly, you have to add a last name property to data, even if you just need to set it to an empty string at first. This way, setting vm.lastname here will have completely different behavior and will force a re-render. So it's not possible to add new properties to data at runtime that are reliably reactive. But it is possible, however, to add new properties to objects that are already in data or new items to arrays that are already in data at runtime, as long as a few guidelines are followed. For instance, imagine if we had an array containing the names of some JavaScript frameworks like this. And then we'll add a div with the v4 directive to display them. So FW will be our made-up name for the looping variable. For each FW in frameworks, we'll just display the name. So we can see in the console that vm.frameworks, the item at index 2, is React, because its zero-based index is 2. You might then try to add an additional item by setting vm.frameworks3 to Vue. But notice that nothing happens above. This is because Vue isn't trying to intercept that array item assignment with a special setter function. But it does wrap many of the most common array methods so that, for example, vm.frameworks.push Vue does have an effect. Again, notice how it catches up here, and now there are two views. Because it is reading from the same variable that we're setting, it's just that the additional code isn't there to make the reactivity work reliably. If I added an object with properties of a web browser, I might initially just have a name. If I tried to set a version property for vm.browser down here, that would be okay because vm.lastname will trigger a re-render and it will also pick that up. So first, let me display browser.name and then browser.version, which we haven't mentioned yet. So if I refresh, I see the browser name, and then if I try to add vm.browserversion, this has no effect. So I won't get a re-render, but for this, we have view.set, which takes an object, a property name, and a value. And I did a refresh there because setting it the wrong way seemed to interfere with this. But you can see that when I use view.set, it's updated immediately, and it will set up the reactivity. There's also view.delete. And both of these work on arrays if you pass an index instead of a property name. And now Angular is missing from this list. That should give you a better idea of what's going on under the hood of a Vue instance, along with some of the limitations. Next, we'll look at computed properties, which give us a little more power when defining relationships between our reactive properties.